The blood-red sunset painted the Montana sky as Wilhelmina James clutched the crumpled letter in her trembling hands, her last hope disintegrating like dust in the wind. Silver Creek, Montana Territory, 1876. A place that was supposed to be her sanctuary had become yet another reminder of all she had lost. The stagecoach had deposited her unceremoniously at the edge of town 3 days prior, her meager possessions packed in one worn trunk, her heart shattered beyond recognition. At 23, Wilhelmina Willa, to the few who had ever cared about her, was already acquainted with more grief than most endured in a lifetime. "Madam, you can't stay here after closing." The postmaster's voice interrupted her thoughts. His eyes softened with pity, that same look she'd grown to despise. "Town ain't safe for a lady alone after dark." "Thank you for your concern," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm raging within. She folded the letter, tucking it into her pocket, the final rejection from her former fiancé's family. They wanted nothing to do with the woman their son had discarded, especially one carrying such shameful secrets. The main street of Silver Creek stretched before her, buildings casting long shadows as the day surrendered to night. The Silver Dollar Saloon blazed with light and raucous laughter, a stark contrast to the quiet desperation tightening around Willa's chest. She had exactly $3.42 to her name. The boarding house had already made it clear her credit would extend no further than tomorrow morning. The teaching position she'd been promised had evaporated upon her arrival, filled by the mayor's niece instead. Her careful plans, like everything else in her life, had crumbled to nothing. "Miss, you look like you could use a hot meal." Willa turned to find a woman with kind eyes standing in the doorway of a modest restaurant. "The kitchen's closing, but we've got stew that'll just go to waste otherwise." Pride warred with hunger. Pride lost. "That's very kind of you." Inside, the woman Martha, she introduced herself, set a bowl of hearty stew before Willa. "New in town, I take it?" "Yes." Willa savored the warmth of the food. "I was to teach at the school, but—" Mabel Peterson got that position. "Mayor's family." Martha nodded knowingly. "You need work, then?" "Desperately." The admission cost her, but desperation had a way of stripping away pretense. Martha wiped her hands on her apron. "Can you cook? Clean? My sister runs a ranch about 5 miles outside town. Lost their housekeeper last month. It ain't glamorous work, but it's honest." Hope flickered, faint but present. "I'm a quick learner." "The Sundance Ranch. Ask for Adelaide Stewart. Tell her Martha sent you." She paused. Fair warning, her husband's foreman is particular about who comes onto that property. Don't let him scare you off. Willa nodded gratefully. "Thank you. I'll go first thing tomorrow." The morning dawned clear and cool as Willa set out walking, her trunk left at the boarding house until she knew whether this opportunity would bear fruit. The miles stretched long before her, dust coating her boots and the hem of her blue cotton dress. By the time the ranch came into view, her feet ached and sweat dampened her collar despite the spring chill. Sundance Ranch sprawled across the landscape, a large main house, a barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. Cattle grazed in distant pastures. It was bigger than she'd imagined, intimidatingly so. As Willa approached, a man emerged from the barn. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair visible beneath his Stetson, he moved with the easy confidence of someone entirely at home in his own skin. His face, tanned and weathered, suggested he spent most days under the Montana sun. "Hold it right there," he called, his deep voice carrying across the yard. He strode toward her, one hand resting casually near the revolver at his hip. "This is private property, madam." Willa stiffened her spine. "I'm looking for Adelaide Stewart. Martha from town sent me about the housekeeper position." His eyes, a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin, narrowed as he assessed her. "You don't look like a housekeeper." "And what, precisely, should a housekeeper look like?" she retorted, fatigue making her bolder than wisdom advised. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Fair point. I'm Riley Steele, foreman here at Sundance." He studied her for another moment. "You walk all the way from town?" "Yes." Something like respect flickered in his expression. "Wait here." He disappeared into the house, returning moments later. "Mrs. Stewart will see you." Adelaide Stewart proved to be a small, energetic woman in her 40s with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. She interviewed Willa in the kitchen while serving her cool water and biscuits. Ever kept house before? She asked directly. I managed my father's household after my mother passed, Willa answered. I can cook, clean, mend, and keep accounts. Education. I trained as a teacher in Boston. Adelaide raised an eyebrow. Long way from Boston. What brings you to Montana territory? The question Willa had been dreading. A fresh start, she said simply. Adelaide nodded slowly. We all need those sometimes. She didn't press further. Pay is $20 a month plus room and board. Sundays off unless there's a special occasion. Think you can handle it? Relief washed over Willa. Yes, madam. When would you like me to start? Now's as good a time as any. Riley can fetch your things from town later. And just like that, Willa had employment, shelter, and a reprieve from the crushing uncertainty that had dogged her steps since leaving Boston. The room was small but clean, a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, a hook for her clothes, and a small window overlooking the ranch yard. After weeks of travel and worry, it felt like a palace. The days fell into a rhythm. Willa rose before dawn to help cook breakfast for the ranch hands. She cleaned, laundered, and assisted Adelaide with the endless tasks of running a large ranch household. The work was hard but satisfying, leaving her too exhausted at days end to dwell on the past. Riley Steele remained a constant, if distant, presence. He treated her with formal politeness when their paths crossed, but something in his watchful gaze suggested he was waiting for what? Willa couldn't say. 2 weeks into her employment, disaster struck. Willa was carrying a stack of clean linens when a wave of dizziness overwhelmed her. She staggered, clutching at the wall for support as the world tilted alarmingly. Strong hands caught her before she could fall. Whoa there! Riley's voice came from somewhere above her. I've got you. Mortified, Willa tried to right herself. I'm fine. Just lost my balance. Like hell you did. His arms supported her weight effortlessly. You're white as a sheet. Before she could protest further, he swept her up and carried her to the kitchen, depositing her gently in a chair. Mrs. Stewart, he called. Adelaide hurried in, took one look at Willa, and pressed a hand to her forehead. No fever. When did you last eat, girl? Willa tried to remember. Breakfast, I think. It's nearly sundown, Riley said sharply. You're working yourself into the ground. Adelaide was already pouring broth into a bowl. Drink this. Slowly. Willa obeyed, embarrassment burning her cheeks. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Nonsense. Adelaide waved away her apology. But Riley's right. You're pushing too hard. I just want to earn my keep, Willa whispered. Something in her tone made Riley study her more closely. No one's questioning your worth here, he said quietly. That night, unable to sleep, Willa slipped outside. The air was cool, the sky ablaze with stars unlike anything she'd seen in Boston. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders and breathed deeply, trying to quiet her tumultuous thoughts. Can't sleep? Riley's voice startled her. He emerged from the shadows, a cigarette glowing briefly as he took a drag. Just needed some air, she replied. He nodded, coming to stand beside her. Together they gazed at the vast expanse of land stretching to the mountains. Beautiful country, he said after a while. Dangerous, though. Not forgiving of mistakes. Is anywhere. The words escaped before she could stop them. Riley glanced at her, his expression thoughtful in the moonlight. Some places more than others, I reckon. He paused. Running from something, Miss James? Her heart skipped. What makes you say that? Educated Boston lady doesn't end up housekeeping in Montana without a reason. Willa stared straight ahead. Everyone has a past, Mr. Steele. True enough. He dropped his cigarette, grinding it under his boot. But not everyone looks like they're being hunted by it. Their eyes met. For a breathless moment, Willa felt seen in a way that terrified her. Get some rest, he finally said, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. Morning comes early around here. As spring mellowed into summer, Willa found herself settling into life at Sundance Ranch. Adelaide treated her more like family than hired help, teaching her the particulars of ranch living. The Cowboys, initially wary of the fancy Eastern lady, warmed to her practical nature and her willingness to learn their ways. And then there was Riley. Their midnight conversation had shifted something between them. He began seeking her out, casually stopping by the kitchen when she was baking, offering to carry heavy loads, bringing her wildflowers he claimed Adelaide might like for the table. One blazing July afternoon, He found her struggling with the pump in the yard, trying to fill a water bucket for laundry. "Here, let me," he said, reaching around her to grasp the handle. His chest brushed her back, his breath warm against her hair. Willa froze, acutely aware of his proximity. "Thank you," she managed, stepping aside quickly. Too quickly her skirt caught on a rough edge of the pump, tearing with a distinct rip. "Damn it," she muttered, then flushed at her unladylike language. Riley laughed, a rich sound that sent unexpected warmth through her. "Don't worry, I won't tell the Ladies' Temperance Union." He knelt, examining the tear. "Bad one. I've got a needle and thread in my quarters if you'd like to mend it now." The offer was innocent enough, but Willa hesitated. "I should finish the laundry first." "The dirty shirts can wait," he said, standing. "Come on." His quarters were attached to the barn, a sparse but tidy room with a narrow bed, a table, and few personal belongings. He rummaged in a drawer and produced a small sewing kit. "Ranch work is hard on clothes," he explained, handing it to her. "Learned to mend my own early on." Willa settled on the single chair, grateful for the chance to sit. July heat combined with pregnancy, her secret still hidden beneath increasingly creative alterations to her dresses, was taking its toll. "You're not like most cowboys I've met," she observed as she threaded the needle. Riley leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "And how many cowboys have you met, Miss Boston?" She smiled despite herself. "Fair point. But still most men wouldn't carry sewing supplies." "Most men are fools," he replied simply. "No sense in throwing away good clothes because of a tear." As she worked, Riley spoke of his life, 15 years working ranches across the territory, the last 5 at Sundance. He'd been born in Pennsylvania, left home at 16 after his mother died, and his father took to the bottle. "What about you?" he asked as she finished the neat row of stitches. "What's your story, Wilhelmina James?" Perhaps it was the heat, or the kindness in his eyes, or simply the weight of carrying her secrets alone for so long. Whatever the reason, Willa found herself speaking. "I was engaged to be married in Boston. A suitable match, my father called it. Edward was from a good family, had prospects in his father's shipping business." The words came easier than she'd expected. 3 months before the wedding, I discovered I was with child. She couldn't look at Riley, focusing instead on knotting the thread. Edward was displeased. Said it complicated matters. He suggested a doctor who could resolve the situation discreetly. "But you refused," Riley said quietly. Willa nodded. "He gave me a choice: get rid of the child or get out of his life. When I chose the latter, he told everyone I had betrayed him, that the child might not even be his." Her hands trembled slightly. "My father believed him. Called me broken. Damaged goods. Said no decent man would want me now." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Willa looked up, bracing for disgust or judgment in Riley's eyes. Instead, she found a carefully controlled anger. "Your father and that spineless excuse for a man were wrong," he said, his voice low and fierce. "There's nothing broken about protecting your child." Tears threatened. Willa blinked them back. "The rest of Boston society didn't see it that way. So I left." Riley crossed the room, kneeling before her chair. His calloused hand covered hers, surprisingly gentle. "How far along?" 5 months now, she admitted. "Adelaide doesn't know yet, though I suspect she's guessing. I'll need to tell her soon. Find somewhere else before I become a burden." "You won't be going anywhere," Riley said with quiet authority. "Adelaide lost 3 babies before they had Stuart. She won't turn away a woman in your situation." Their eyes met, and Willa saw something in his gaze that stole her breath. "Why are you being so kind to me?" "Because I see you, Willa James," he said simply. "And nothing about you is broken." That evening at dinner, with Riley's steadying presence beside her, Willa confessed her situation to Adelaide and her husband, Frank Stewart. Their reaction proved Riley right. Rather than anger, Adelaide's eyes filled with compassion. "Oh, my dear girl," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze Willa's hand. "You should have told us sooner. No wonder you've been working yourself to exhaustion." Frank cleared his throat, clearly less comfortable with the topic, but no less kind. "You have a home here as long as you need it. Both of you," he added, nodding toward her middle. Relief crashed through Willa like a wave. "I can still work," she insisted. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity to help family," Adelaide said firmly. "And that's what you are now." Later, Riley walked Willa back to her room in the gathering dusk. "Told you," he said, satisfaction evident in his voice. "You did," she conceded. They reached her door, lingering in the warm evening air. "Thank you, Riley, for everything." He studied her face in the fading light. "Can I ask you something?" At her nod, he continued, "The baby's father, do you love him?" The question surprised her. "I thought I did," she answered honestly. "Now I'm not sure I ever really knew him." Riley nodded slowly. "Get some rest, Willa." His fingers brushed hers briefly. Things have a way of working out as they should. As summer progressed, Willa's condition became impossible to hide. Adelaide insisted she take on lighter duties, focusing on mending, cooking, and bookkeeping rather than the more strenuous cleaning tasks. The ranch hands treated her with awkward but well-meaning courtesy, and Frank Stewart built a cradle that he placed shyly in her room one evening. Riley, however, changed most dramatically. He became her constant protector, checking on her throughout the day, bringing her special treats from town, reading to her in the evenings when her back ached too much to sit comfortably at the dinner table. Their friendship deepened into something Willa dared not name, even to herself. One sweltering August afternoon, she was alone in the house, everyone else out seeing to a broken fence line. The baby had been active all day, kicking and turning until Willa felt bruised from within. She was reaching for a jar of preserves when a sharp pain knifed through her abdomen. She gasped, clutching the counter as liquid soaked her skirts. Too soon. It was too soon. "Adelaide," she called weakly, knowing no one was close enough to hear. Another contraction seized her, dropping her to her knees. Fear clawed at her throat as she crawled toward the door, desperate to reach help. The sound of hoofbeats outside was the sweetest music she'd ever heard. "Help!" she cried, her voice breaking. "Please." The door burst open. Riley stood framed in the sunlight, his expression shifting from curiosity to alarm in an instant. "Willa." He was beside her in 2 strides, gathering her into his arms. "What's happened?" "The baby," she managed between gritted teeth. "Coming. Too early." His face paled beneath his tan, but his voice remained steady. "Hold on to me. Doc Peterson's in town, and town's closer than finding Adelaide." He carried her to his horse, mounting awkwardly while cradling her against his chest. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair. "Just hold on." The ride to town was a blur of pain and fear. Riley's arms around her were the only solid thing in a world come undone. He spoke constantly, his deep voice anchoring her promises that she would be all right, that the baby would be strong, that he wouldn't leave her. At the doctor's house, everything happened in a rush of activity. Willa was vaguely aware of Riley arguing with someone, "I'm not leaving her," before another contraction swept away rational thought. Hours passed in a haze of pain unlike anything she'd imagined. Through it all, Riley stayed, holding her hand, wiping her brow, his blue eyes fierce with determination as though he could will strength into her failing body. "Can't," she whispered after a particularly brutal contraction. "Riley, I can't." He leaned close, his forehead touching hers. "You can. You're the strongest woman I've ever known, Wilhelmina James. And I need you to fight, because—" His voice broke. "Because I love you. Do you hear me? I love you, and I'm not letting you go." His words pierced through the fog of pain, igniting something within her. When the doctor urged her to push again, she found reserves of strength she didn't know existed. With a final, desperate effort, her daughter was born tiny, red-faced, and blessedly, miraculously alive. The sound of her indignant first cry was the most beautiful thing Willa had ever heard. "A fighter, like her mama," Riley said, his voice thick with emotion as the doctor placed the swaddled infant in Willa's arms. Willa gazed down at her daughter's perfect face, overwhelmed by a love so powerful it threatened to consume her. "Hope," she whispered. "Her name is Hope." Riley's calloused finger gently stroked the baby's cheek. "It suits her." The next few days passed in a fog of exhaustion and wonder. Doc Peterson insisted Willa remain at his house until she regained her strength. Adelaide arrived the morning after the birth, bringing clothes for both Willa and the baby, her face alight with joy as she held little Hope. Riley rarely left Willa's side, sleeping in a chair beside her bed, fetching whatever she needed before she could ask. On the 3rd evening, when Hope was asleep in the cradle Doc's wife had provided, Willa finally found the courage to address what had been spoken in the heat of crisis. "Did you mean it?" she asked quietly. "What you said when Hope was coming." Riley looked up from the book he'd been reading aloud to her. Every word. His gaze was steady, uncompromising. "I love you, Willa. Have since about the third day you were at Sundance, even if I was too stubborn to admit it right away. But my situation," she glanced at the sleeping infant, "makes me love you more," he said simply. "Your courage, your heart, I've never known anyone like you." Tears welled in her eyes. "He told me I was broken," she whispered, "damaged beyond repair." Riley took her hand, his expression fierce. "Then you'll mend in my arms," he promised. "If you'll have me." The certainty in his voice, the love in his eyes, it undid her completely. "I love you too," she admitted. "So much it terrifies me." His smile transformed his face. "Good. A healthy fear keeps a person alert in dangerous territory." He leaned forward, brushing his lips against hers, a question, an offer, a promise. Willa answered by deepening the kiss, her heart soaring with possibilities she'd thought forever closed to her. They returned to Sundance Ranch a week later. Willa, Riley, and Tiny Hope to find the bunkhouse cowboys had transformed Willa's small room into a proper nursery, complete with curtains sewn from feed sacks and a rocking chair of mysterious origin. "Wedding present," gruff old Hank muttered when Willa thanked them tearfully. "Assuming you're smart enough to say yes to the boss here." Riley's proposal came that evening, under the vast Montana sky. No flowery speeches or grand gestures, just his hand holding hers, his eyes reflecting starlight as he asked her to build a life with him. "I can't offer you Boston society," he said, "but I can promise you'll never face another storm alone." Her answer was never in doubt. They married 2 weeks later, with Adelaide and Frank as witnesses and little Hope cradled in Martha's arms. The Stewarts' wedding gift was a piece of land adjoining Sundance Ranch and enough lumber to build a modest house. "Always meant for Riley to have it," Frank explained. "Been like a son to us these past years. Now he's got a family to put on it." Life settled into a new rhythm, harder in many ways, but infinitely richer. Their small house took shape through the fall, Riley working alongside the ranch hands who volunteered their free time. Willa planted a garden, learned to shoot a rifle, and discovered she had a talent for breaking the wildest horses on Sundance, much to her husband's mingled pride and terror. Hope grew strong and healthy, her eyes the same startling blue as Riley's, though her hair was Willa's rich brown. She toddled after Riley whenever he was home, squealing with delight when he tossed her high in the air. "She's fearless," Willa observed one evening as they watched Hope determinedly climbing onto a chair. "Like her mother," Riley replied, slipping an arm around Willa's waist and drawing her close. His hand rested on the slight swell of her stomach, where their second child, just beginning to make itself known, grew. Looking at her husband's face, Willa marveled at the journey that had brought her here, from the drawing rooms of Boston to the wild beauty of Montana, from desperate despair to a joy so complete it humbled her daily. "Any regrets?" Riley asked, somehow reading her thoughts as he often seemed to do. Willa shook her head. "Not a single one." He kissed her then, tender and thorough, until Hope's demanding pat on their legs reminded them they weren't alone. Riley scooped up his daughter, tickling her until she shrieked with laughter. "What do you say, little miss? Should we show Mama what we found by the creek today?" Hope nodded enthusiastically, and Riley carried her to the shelf where he'd placed a small wooden box. Inside was a perfect robin's egg, brilliantly blue. "Life," Riley said softly as Hope cradled the treasure in her small palms. "Always finding a way, even in the wildest places." Their eyes met over their daughter's head, and Willa felt the truth of it deep in her bones. She had come to Montana broken, but here in this land of harsh beauty and unexpected grace, in the circle of her husband's arms, she had found more than mending. She had found herself remade, stronger at the broken places, her heart expanded beyond what she'd ever thought possible. Outside, the Montana sunset painted the sky in shades of promise, and Wilhelmina James Steele stepped forward to meet it, whole and unafraid. The years passed, each one adding new threads to the tapestry of their life together. Their second child, a son they named Franklin after Frank Stewart, arrived during a blizzard that forced Riley to deliver him himself, guided by a calm Willa who discovered she had an unexpected aptitude for crisis. "Next time," Riley had said, wiping his brow after placing their howling son in her arms. "We're moving to town a month before the due date." Willa had simply laughed, drunk on the miracle of their expanding family. "Next time?" His answering grin had been both sheepish and hopeful. By 1886, their household numbered 5 Hope, now 9 and as fearless as her name suggested. Franklin, a thoughtful 7-year-old who shadowed Riley everywhere, and Ruby, their surprise blessing who at 3 had already mastered the art of wrapping every ranch hand around her little finger. The Steele Ranch prospered alongside Sundance. Riley's keen eye for horseflesh and Willa's unexpected business acumen proved a formidable combination. They bred and trained some of the finest quarter horses in the territory, with buyers coming from as far as California. Not that life was without its challenges. Montana winters tested even the strongest spirit. Drought years meant tightened belts and sleepless nights. The changing territory with its influx of settlers, expanding railroads, and evolving politics brought new complexities to ranching life. Through it all, Riley and Willa faced each obstacle as they had since the beginning together, their partnership deepening with every season. The love that had once seemed so improbable to Willa became the bedrock of her existence, as essential and expected as the sunrise. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Riley surprised her with a trip back east, not to Boston with its painful memories, but to New York City, where they stayed in a grand hotel, attended the theater, and wandered museums hand in hand while the children stayed with Adelaide and Frank. "Happy?" Riley asked one evening as they stood on the hotel balcony, the city lights spread before them. Willa leaned into his embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and pine and home. "Beyond words," she answered truthfully. "But I miss our mountains." He chuckled, the sound vibrating against her back. "Thought you might say that. Montana's in your blood now, city girl." "As are you," she said, turning in his arms to face him. At 33, Riley Steele was more handsome than ever, a few strands of silver threading through his dark hair, laugh lines deepening around eyes still as blue and piercing as the day they'd met. "I love you, Cowboy, more with every passing year." He kissed her then, with the same hunger that had never diminished, only grown richer with time and knowledge of each other. "Let's go home," he murmured against her lips. "I've seen all of New York I need to see." They returned to Montana as autumn painted the landscape in gold and crimson. Hope ran to meet them first, her braids flying, Franklin and Ruby close behind. As Willa gathered her children close, breathing in their scents and marveling at how they seemed to have grown in just 2 weeks, she caught Riley watching them, his expression one of naked gratitude. Later that night, with the children finally asleep and the house quiet around them, Willa sat at her dressing table, brushing out her hair. Riley appeared behind her in the mirror, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders. "I've been thinking," he said, his eyes meeting hers in the reflection. "A dangerous pastime," she teased. His lips quirked. "About what you told me, all those years ago. What your father said." Willa stilled, the brush pausing mid-stroke. She rarely thought of those dark days anymore, the wounds long healed into faint scars. "What about it? He called you broken." Riley's hands tightened slightly on her shoulders. "But he couldn't see what I saw from the beginning." "And what was that?" she asked softly. Riley turned her to face him, kneeling before her chair in an echo of that long-ago moment in his quarters when she'd first shared her secret. "Not broken. Unfinished. Like land waiting for the right season to bloom." His calloused thumb traced the curve of her cheek. "You were always whole, Willa. You just needed someone who could see it." Tears pricked her eyes as she covered his hand with hers. "You did more than see it. You helped me see it too." That night, wrapped in each other's arms, they spoke of the future, of Hope's remarkable talent with horses, of Franklin's dreams of college in the East, of little Ruby's endless questions about everything under the sun, of the changing territory, likely to become a state soon, of growing old together on the land they loved. "You know what I thought that first day?" Riley murmured as sleep began to claim them. "When you came walking up to Sundance, dust on your skirts and your chin held high like you were daring the world to knock you down." "What?" Willa asked, nestling closer. "That you were either the bravest or the most foolhardy woman I'd ever laid eyes on." His chuckle rumbled through his chest. Turned out you were both. And I knew right then my life would never be the same. As dawn broke over the mountains the next morning, Willa stood on their porch, coffee in hand, watching the land come alive with light. Behind her, the sounds of her family stirring, Riley's deep voice telling Ruby to let her mother have a moment's peace. Hope's laughter as she teased her brother. The clatter of breakfast preparations created a symphony more beautiful than any she'd heard in New York's grand concert halls. This was her life, not the one she'd been raised to expect, certainly not the one she'd feared she'd be condemned to when she'd fled Boston in disgrace. This life, carved from love and perseverance and faith in each other, was infinitely better than anything she could have imagined. And as Riley stepped onto the porch beside her, slipping an arm around her waist and pressing a kiss to her temple, Wilhelmina James Steele knew with bone-deep certainty that she had indeed mended in his arms, not into what she had been before, but into something stronger, truer, and far more precious. "Morning, beautiful," he murmured against her hair. Willa smiled, leaning into his embrace as the Montana sun painted their world in gold. "Morning, my love." Together, they turned to face another day on the land that had become their destiny, surrounded by the family that was their greatest blessing, their hearts full and unbroken.